Hello everybody, welcome to another Avid Assistant video. My name's Jack and I am the Avid Assistant. And in this video we're going to be looking at making Avid transcodes in Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve, since this is by far globally on professional film sets, for scripted at least, the most common way to make Avid transcodes. However, as editors and assistant editors, we rarely ever see the source media. In fact, we're often just given these transcodes from either a dailies lab or the DIT department, either via a runner dropping us off a drive or via a download link through something like Aspera. And so many of you may have never actually had to make these transcodes yourself. However, I feel like the process of this is an extremely valuable thing for everyone in editorial to know. So whether you're at university or a recent graduate and you're just looking to learn more about how this transcodes process works on set, or maybe you're a seasoned editor about to do a short film on the side and there's no DIT work being done, you've just been given the source rushes and you want to make the transcodes the way that they are often done for you by a DIT department, this video will take you through the entire process from bringing those rushes into Resolve all the way through to getting them into Avid Media Composer ready to start cutting with, as well as looking at things like ALEs and getting metadata from the camera, applying LUTs so that we don't have to work with milky log footage, as well as doing data burn-ins of stuff like source camera name, source clip name, or anything else that you might need straight into your transcodes so that you have that reference data burned in discreetly in the corners in case you ever need it there, just as a reference. We'll go through all of it. So let's get started. Right, so first off, to get started, let's open up DaVinci Resolve. Now, a couple of things here. I'm using DaVinci Resolve 19 Studio for this, but the methodology for how I'm going to go through this whole process hasn't changed since I first used Resolve with version 8 many years ago, thinking like 2012-ish, around that time. And as long as you're making 1080p Avid proxies, it won't make a difference whether you're in Studio or the free version. That you should be able to do everything in the free version. I have Studio because occasionally I like to render stuff out at 4K or beyond and make DCPs and different stuff like that. But for the purposes of what we're about to do, making transcodes for Avid Media Composer, standard Resolve should work just fine. Right, so as soon as DaVinci Resolve opens up, as per many applications like this, we'll have a project selection screen. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project, and I'm going to be using material from a short film called Crossover. So I'm going to go Crossover, transcodes. And here we are inside your DaVinci Resolve project. Now, if you haven't used Resolve before, one of the most important things about the user interface to be able to navigate through the different areas to do what you need to do is the workspace tabs down the bottom. So this is very similar to workspaces in Avid Media Composer, and these have pretty much always been represented in Resolve by these icons along the bottom from left to right. We have Media, Cut, Edit, Fusion, Color, Fairlight, and Deliver. So to begin with, we're going to have to get some media in. So we're going to jump over to Media tab. And inside our Media tab, we have a file browser up here on the top left, and we have what Resolve refers to as the media pool here in the bottom half, with an inspector to get metadata information on clips that we select along the right. Now, before I bring any media in, I'm first going to come over here right where it says Master, and I'm just going to right click and create a new bin. And this is a sort of personal preference thing for me, but I'm going to create a bin for each shoot day. So say day 1, like here. And with that bin selected, I'm going to go hunting through the file browser area up here to find my footage, and I'll bring it directly into the day 1 bin, just to keep everything nice and tidy. It's important whether you're in Resolve, Premiere, Avid, always keep everything structured and organized, nice and tidy, so that you can find it later if you have to come back or re-go through any steps. Right, so I've navigated down inside my folder structure here, and I've found my files for this particular shoot day. I've got 4 camera reels, which are shot on an Arri Alexa, and I have a folder of audio as well. So I'm not going to be touching the audio, I'm just going to be dealing with the picture files here. But one thing I want to point out while I'm here is if your drive doesn't show up for any reason here on the left when you go to search for your media, just right click in an empty space and hit add new location. You'll then be able to add a drive as a volume, as a location in the sidebar there for you to peruse. But continuing on, I have all my reels selected here. I've got reels A1 through to A4 of my Arri media. I've selected my bin, and I'm just going to drag and drop that straight into my bin. Now you'll notice this pop-up that's came up here right as I tried to do that, which is alerting me to the fact that the frame rate of this material that I'm trying to bring in is differing to the frame rate of my project. Now I hadn't set a frame rate for my project yet for this reason, so I could highlight this, because Resolve very kindly gives me the option to change it. which I'm going to do right here, and I'll just change my project to match the material that comes in. But an important thing to do, say if this was the first reel that you were doing, is after you've brought these clips in, just look at the metadata and scroll through to the frame rate over here. You can see it under FPS, and make sure that's correct, just in case the first day that you got in was actually shot accidentally at the wrong frame rate, so that you can be alerted to that. So now that I have all my media in the media pool, you can see if I click on each clip, it shows up, we can see it. We have a few steps to add here at this stage, just to make sure that we're tagging it with the correct metadata and adding in our LUTs and any other prep work that might have to do before we encode it out as Avid transcodes and send it over to Media Composer. So first things first on that front is tape name. So if you come down to the very bottom right, and you'll see the little cogwheel here where we can open up our project settings. Inside our project settings, you're going to want to go in the sidebar to General Options. Then in this area up here, there's a checkbox called Assist Using Real Names. We click that from the source clip file name. So you see we've got various options here as to how we could generate our real names, and these real names will get burned into the metadata of the actual MXF. So as soon as we bring these in, that will be under the tape column in Avid. When we could have generated this from the actual source file, clip file path name. I've done it once before using media pool folder name, where I've had a different bin in the media pool for each individual reel, just called like A001, A002. And we're generating it that way. If the tape data is already embedded in the clip files, you could do it that way. However, the most common, by far, method that I have seen in the scripted world, both in film and in TV, used by DITs on set, is the source clip file name. And this will just essentially duplicate the source clip file name into the tape column to serve as your real name. And this is the commonality that will allow you to relink back to these source master clips later down the line when you're turning over to offline. Now, if this stage isn't done correctly, this can completely mess up your transcodes and your connection to the source in order to relink. And it's one of the first things that assistant editors would check for when ingesting media from a DIT or from a dailies lab, is to make sure that that metadata is there. So this is the option that we do just at the very, very start when we first create the project, to make sure that metadata will always be included in your transcodes. Now, while we are in settings here, one other option that I would always make sure is ticked is under image scaling. So if I jump over to image scaling in the sidebar on the left here, I want to make sure that in input scaling, we have scale entire image to fit. Now, this is the default nowadays, so you shouldn't technically have to check it, but I always check it anyway, just for my own sanity. And this is just making sure that when you're bringing stuff in for the preview window and under output scaling, same option there, when you render out, the entire image is scaled into the frame that you're exporting or that you're previewing and bringing in. And while we're on the topic of that, when you're going through your footage, just doing a quick check before transcoding, if you happen to have any spherical footage or any particular, unusual footage that might need to be reformatted before rendering out as 1080p Avid transcodes, the way to go about that would be to select the given clips, right click and select clip attributes. Then under the video tab, the first one there, under pixel aspect ratio, you could make any adjustments that you would need to be to account for anamorphic lenses or some other spherical adjustment that needs to be fixed in order to, render it correctly, your transcodes. Now, while we're here under this option, if you were being very precise and you happen to notice that you had some clips that were upside down, where they'll attach the camera to a gimbal to get a sort of tracking shot low to the ground, that's fairly commonly done. Then you could rotate the shot here with the image flip or image orientation option, just at 180 degrees there under image orientation. But I wouldn't stress too much about that one. That's something that I would prefer to do once in Avid, personally. But if you wanted to have that sorted in your transcodes, that's where you would go about that. Right, now lastly, one more thing here that we're going to want to do while we're in the media pool, and that is add our LUT. So LUT, if you're not familiar, stands for lookup table. This is essentially a quick pre-grade to bring a shot out of log. As many professional film cameras are shot in log, this kind of milky, you know, low contrast color palette in order to capture everything in the frame and better prepare the shots for grading later down the line. And that's great for getting all that information and data for the grade later. However, it's not really great for us to look at. It looks kind of washed out, it looks a bit milky, doesn't look ideal. And so we will often apply a lookup table or a LUT at the very start when making these transcodes so that they look nice and pretty for us when we're working. So let me show you how to apply that LUT to your clips. Firstly, select the given clips. I'm just going to select all of these here since I know they're all in the same color space, they're all from the same log, from the same camera. If you had multiple different cameras here and they were shot in different types of log or from different camera manufacturers, you would do these individually in different batches. This batch here is all from an Arri Alexa, so I'm going to apply the same LUT to all my footage here. So I've selected all my footage, and then I'm going to right click and go to the LUT menu. And then you can see we'll have all of these different categories, mostly actually by camera manufacturer. And so this is an Arri. I'm going to go to the Arri menu. And then in there is the Arri Log C to Rec 709 LUT, which is exactly the one we want to use here. And I'm going to select that. And you'll notice as soon as I did that, you could see the color change in the background. And now if I cycle through, my shots look much, much prettier. Now this crossover project here did actually have another camera in it, which was using RED files. So you can see I've brought these in here just so that I can demonstrate this different LUT here. And you can see very washed out, same, it's shot in log again. But as each camera manufacturer's log is a little bit different, if I was to right click and do LUT and apply the Arri LUT, it doesn't quite look right. It's actually done a not bad job here. But since these are RED files, we would want to select it and use a LUT from the RED family. So I'm going to come down here under RED and select that one. And then you're getting a more appropriate color space LUT to use. Now, one other little thing that I'll point out here while we're on the topic of LUTs is that it is not uncommon at all for you to have custom LUTs. You won't necessarily be using the standard LUT given to you by the camera manufacturer, like the Arri or RED ones that I've just demonstrated there. It is entirely possible that your DIT or your DOP or someone else in the camera crew has made a custom LUT for your show, like a more custom tweaked grade specifically for the look of your show. Or even in some cases they might have given you several, or like a day one and a night one, or one for certain locations. And if this is the case and you're going to be doing the transcodes, then you're going to want to get those custom LUTs into Resolve so that you can use them in those drop-down menus. So here's how to do that. So back in this settings window using the cogwheel in the bottom right like we did before, we're going to go to the color management in the sidebar on the left here. And then if you scroll down to lookup tables, you'll see this option here called Open LUT Folder. If you click that, it will open a folder in your file browser, allowing you to just drag and drop the LUT that you've been given straight into here. So whether it's an XML or a .cube file or an iLUT, you'll be able to drop those directly into here, either straight in the top level, or you could create a folder for the name of your show. You'll see that folder's empty just now here, but I'm just going to copy a few different LUTs that I have into there. I'm not going to use them, I'll just copy them inside. And then if I come back to DaVinci Resolve, then while we're still in that color management area and settings, you're just going to want to click Update Lists. And that will just scan your LUT folder on the outside and add any new ones that you have added into the drop-down menus in Resolve, which we can see. If we go to the LUT drop-down menu here, we can see crossover, and then there's those LUTs that I've just added. So if you get sent a custom LUT by the camera department or by anyone else in your production to be used for transcodes, that's how you would add it and get it in for you to be able to apply it to your footage. Right, now we're ready to start prepping this stuff for Avid transcodes. Right, so I'm going to select all these and right click and go create new timeline from selected clips. And this is just going to create a new timeline and just dump all of these clips in order so that we can start rendering them out. So I'm just going to call this crossover day one picture. Now this is because I'm going to do the whole of day one in one go here. Now if you were transcoding, say, splits, where you were doing first half of the day and then you got given the rushes later for the second half of the day, then you could just put another underscore at the end and go A and B, for example, for the two different splits. Just make sure that your naming convention is very clear and, even more importantly, consistent throughout your transcoding during the shoot. So if I hit create there, it's made that timeline. It's just down here. Now you could leave it in there, that would make perfect sense to leave it in the day bin, but I'm just going to create a new bin called rushes timelines. And then as I transcode the rushes each day, I like to keep all my timelines in that bin. So I'll just drop it in there and then we can see it there. So if I wanted to do the same thing with my red footage, I could create a timeline with that there and put that in there as well. Now this was done as a sort of splinter shoot, which is why I'm keeping it as a separate timeline just now. But generally speaking, even if it was multiple cameras, you could just apply your different LUTs and put it all onto one timeline to render out. These do not have to be on separate timelines. Just wanted to point that out. I'm going to double click on my first one, my main one here, to open the timeline, which should jump us forward, as you can see down the bottom, into the edit tab. So you see the workspace change. Now, while I'm here in the edit tab, before I start rendering this out, I like to select my timeline and export an ALE out of my timeline. And this just means that once I've made my transcodes, I'm able to bring all of the source metadata from the camera into Avid nice and easily and merge it with the clips in Avid. This is something that I'll demonstrate at the end of the video, but I just want to show you how to do it while we're here at this stage. And it's nice and easy. We're just going to right click on the timeline and go Timelines, Export, ALE. So I'm going to click on ALE here, and then I'm going to export that out to an ALEs folder where I can find this later down the line. And if you happen to have done any custom color tweaks beyond just applying a standard LUT here, you may also want to export a CDL along with the ALE, which is a color decision list, just as a record of those tweaks and changes. Anybody who's brought in material or received material from a DIT before to bring into Avid, you may have seen this before. Now, if you have multiple timelines like this, by the way, and you try to export ALEs for all of them, you'll notice that you might not have the option, and that is because the option to export an ALE is only available if that timeline is loaded. So you might have to double click the timeline to open it up in order to get the option to export an ALE. Right, but that's enough about metadata and lookup tables and all the rest of it. Let's export some Avid transcodes. So with my timeline loaded, I'm going to jump all the way over to the final tab in Resolve, known as the Deliver tab. And here I'm going to set up and save a little export preset for Avid transcodes. So follow along here and you see what I'll do. So first off, I'm just going to save where this is going to go. Then under here, we're going to change render from single clip to individual clips, just meaning that it's not going to render out the whole timeline as one clip, like you would export out an edited timeline. We want individual clips so that each one is rendered out as a single clip and brought in as transcodes. Then under there we have 3 tabs: video, audio, and file. So I'll quickly run through all the settings you'll need to do in each one of these to reliably make Avid transcodes each time. So starting with video, we're going to change format to MXF OP Atom. Now Avid's compatibility with MXF OP1A has gotten a bit better in recent times, but the default standard most compatible, most Avid friendly format is still MXF OP Atom. So I'm going to use that one, and I highly recommend you do as well. Next under this we have our codec, which is the likes of H.264, ProRes, DNX, those kind of codecs, and we're going to go with Avid's DNX HD. Now you'll notice there we have DNX HD and DNX HR. The only difference between those is HR stands for high resolution. This is just everything above HD. So if you wanted your Avid transcodes to maintain the source resolution, then this would be the one you would need to select. But I can definitely tell you from experience in the scripted world, by far the most common resolution and format for Avid transcodes is 1080p, so we're going to go with DNX HD. Next under this we have type, and this is just like the level of quality of DNX HD. So interestingly enough, DaVinci Resolve still keeps the old naming convention for this that Avid changed, I think, at around 2019 time. But again, just sticking to the most commonly done for Avid transcodes here, we're going to go with LB, or as DaVinci Resolve still calls it here, DNX36. Now that's us for the video tab. Let's look at audio. Linear PCM is the codec that I would always stick with, and the only thing that I actually change here from the default is under channels. The default is always 2, and so I change this to same as source. So just mirror whatever the source is and keep those channels of audio so that we get all the guide audio that is on that camera. Right, now moving over to the file tab, right up the top I'm going to click file name uses source name, because we want to maintain that file naming from all the source camera clips. Then one other thing that you don't necessarily have to, but I like to tick, is down here under preserve source directory levels. And what this is going to do is preserve the source file path, both in the metadata and in terms of where it exports this out. So right under preserve here, you'll see these two little arrows. If I hit up to go up one level, it'll start to show me what the preserve path is. It'll give me an example. So I could keep going up, 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 and I can get to project folder, source, the date, and then the real folder that it's in. Now, I don't necessarily need that many folders, especially when exported out. So I'm going to bring this down a level to just show me the preserve path of the actual camera file structure. So if the camera file structure like this is just one folder per card, I'll keep with that. But if the folder structure for the camera was multiple folders, I would keep all of those as well, just as a sort of trace back of that camera file folder structure in case we need it later down the line. Right now, once you have all of this set up, I'm going to come to these three dots up the top here, right across from render settings, and I'm going to save this as a new preset. 1080p Avid transcodes. And now that the job's fully set up, I can just come down here and click add to render queue. We'll see it appear in the render queue here. This is a queue where you could stack multiple jobs. So for example, I could come back and I could load up my red timeline here as well, then come back to my deliver page and add that to the render queue as well, just to queue up multiple jobs so I don't have to set them all off one at a time. And once you have everything ready, just click render to set these off and Resolve will start making your transcodes. Right, now I want to jump in here for a second for a quick shout out to Edit Stock, which the keen-eyed among you will have noticed is where this footage is from. I've used Edit Stock a good number of times over many years. If you're not familiar, Edit Stock is a website where you can go on and purchase for a small fee rushes from a short film or a scene for you to practice editing. Your package often comes with full paperwork, even continuity paperwork, as well as scripts and reports. You can get feedback on your edits from industry professionals through the website, and you're also invited to use these edits of your professionally made short films on your demo reel as well. It is a fantastic way to practice cutting using real rushes and real footage from real projects. So anyone new to Media Composer or editing in general and just looking for some material to practice with, I can't recommend them enough. I've used them many years. I used them when I was in film school. I've used them since, and I use it when I'm teaching Avid in person. And they have actually been kind enough to offer viewers of this channel a discount code. So if you go to editstock.com/theavidassistant, you can get 20% off a good number of their rushes options for you to download and practice. So if there's anyone in the audience who's been looking for some material to practice their editing with, there you go. There could not be a better option. But let's get back to the video. Right, now I'm including this next little step as an optional section since many productions I've seen don't do this, but on higher end production I have seen this. And so if you're going between or if you're doing your own short film and you like to keep it, I just want to show you how you would apply a burn-in to your transcodes on the way out for stuff like source clip name, source timecode, and potentially even scene and take and slate and stuff like that if you had that metadata available. So first off, within Resolve, you're going to go to the workspace menu up the top and select data burn-in. Now inside there, we just tick to enable the various different burn-ins that we want. I'm going to tick source clip name. I can see that appears here in the background. Now if this was on transcodes that you're going to use for cutting, you probably want it in a much more subtle place. So I could position that using the tools available to you over on the right here. I'm just going to put it right in the corner, crunch the size down to like 20, and I'll crunch down the opacity as well. And we can add other things as well, like for example a source timecode. I'll just put that right next to the source clip name since they are related. And we can add any other ones here that we would like. Scene and take if you had that information in the metadata, or if you wanted to do a custom one, so say you wanted a burn-in on all of this as well. So say you go crossover productions, for example. Now a really neat trick in this data burn-in window here, if you wanted to say group different burn-ins together like source clip name and source timecode that are related, as well as add labels to them, is to use the custom text field. So say if I click down here in custom text, right? So you might think this is just type some text, it appears behind. as you can see there. But just as if we were scripting macros, we can use the percentage symbol here to input variables to get all kinds of metadata burn-ins. So say I type source, as in source clip. I'll put a little colon there. Then I'm going to put the percentage symbol. I get this little drop-down menu. So I could scroll through this drop-down menu, but what would be much easier is I can just type what I'm looking for. I'll type source name comes up. I'm going to go with that. And then I'll also go source timecode, percentage again, and I'll just hit source again, and then we can see source TC is a selectable variable. Click that. Then you can see in the background here, we have these popped up as a burn-in that I can move together as one group. So this would make it a lot easier than having to, say, position these two next to each other, and particularly useful if you wanted to add labels before in each. Me personally, I wouldn't usually label stuff like that. We would just agree upon ahead of time where each burn-in is going to be, and if it's burned into my dailies, it's fairly self-explanatory what each thing is. I want everything to be as small and contained as possible. However, that's me getting specific on burn-ins for dailies. If you were making burn-ins for any other reason in DaVinci Resolve, this is a very, very useful tool. There you go. Now, once you have all of this kind of set up in the data burn-in window, under the project tab, mind you, not in the clip tab, because we want this to apply to everything, then we would just close this. Then just make sure to tweak in your export preset that you're making for your Avid transcodes here. Under video, advanced settings, down where it says data burn-in, you just want it to make sure it's set to same as project. Right, now that that's done, let's get our dailies into Avid. So if I tab back over to my Finder here, I'm just going to navigate to where I had exported those to. Then you can actually see here, in my transcode folder, there's the ALEs that I exported out of Resolve, and we have all these other folders. And this is where Resolve has preserved the source directory file paths of these files on the way out. Now, for bringing these into Avid, I'm just going to run a search here for .mxf so that I can get all of these files in one go. And I'm going to select all these and move it into my Avid Media Files folder. So anyone even relatively familiar with Avid will know that the Avid Media Files folder always lives at the root level of any volume, and this is where Avid stores all of its media. And so we're going to place our media inside here before we bring it into Avid. So inside our Avid Media Files folder, you will find a folder called MXF. Don't mind this media holding bay one, that's for my own purposes, I've made that. But you will always find this MXF folder, and inside there is where you store all of your media. Now mine's a little bit messy at the moment because I've been rescanning all the MDB files and rejigging things, but the important thing to note here, we're going to have to create a folder and just name it as per a number. So I tend to always just use the date from when this material was shot. So the shoot date for this material, I believe, would have been 2001-01-08. So the 8th of January, 2001. So all these transcodes here, where I've searched MXF, drag and drop into my new folder that I've made. So now when I open up Avid Media Composer, it's going to scan this folder and create two little media database folders inside that catalog all the media that's inside there. Let me show you. So as you can see, I've now got Avid loaded in the background here, and I've just made a little test project for this material. And if I tab from a Finder with that new folder we've made selected to Avid, it will scan the folder immediately and catalog everything that's inside. And now before I bring this material in, I'm actually going to rename this folder. So I'm going to rename it with a prefix of the name of the project and then the shoot day picture. And I always leave the date at the end, just in case I ever have to rescan this folder again in Avid for whatever reason, and then I can just remove this prefix I've added, scan it, and then add it back on. This allows us to quickly identify material at the file browser level for each shoot day, or as well, I would do this every time I would import music or sound effects or stuff like that, so that you end up with a very neat and categorized list of folders that contain all of your media. This process is also often referred to as locking off the media, because as soon as you introduce alpha characters or like letters into the naming of this folder, Avid can no longer scan it, it can no longer detect changes that happen inside there. So it will prevent Avid from doing any unwanted media scans of this folder. The only way Avid can scan it is if you rename it to be just numbers or like you did before. However, if you are working in a Nexus or shared network environment, you will need to add the name of your computer as a prefix, then a decimal point, then your number. This computer name and decimal point prefix is very important, as it's a way of identifying MXF folders coming from different computers to the same shared network space. So just remember, when you're creating these folders, if you're in an offline environment or you're just working on a hard drive, RAID, something like that, you're going to want to name your folder just a number, ideally the date. But if you're in a shared network environment, you're going to want the name of your computer, decimal point, then the date. Now, once we have this successfully locked off and we're all happy with our naming structure here, just come into the folder and you'll see the two little files that Avid has added, the PMR and the MDB. And it is this little MDB file that we are interested in right now. MDB stands for Media Database. And if I drag and drop that into my bin, it will populate the bin with all the clips in that folder. And this here is all of the clips that we saw when we were transcoding in Resolve. And as you can see here, they are all online. We can see all of our media. Our LUT is applied. Nothing looks too milky or in log. And we have all 5 channels of our original source audio. Happy days. Now the last thing I'm going to show here to just round this whole process out is importing that ALE that we made in Resolve earlier to get in all that lovely metadata that we had from the camera. So to bring in an ALE, you're going to want to select all your clips in your bin. You can see, by the way, that this is all the metadata we have so far. We can see our tape name, which is correctly filled out as we had set it in Resolve to be a mirror of the source file name. And we have created by Resolve in the comment column. But in terms of source metadata, we pretty much just have that and source timecode. That is until we bring in our ALE. And to do that, we're going to select all of these clips. Just going to do a Command A on this bin to select all my clips. Then I'm just going to check something in my import settings, which we'll find in the settings window under User Import, right here. Once you've opened that, you're going to want to go to this little tab over here called Shotlog, which is a tab that I really think should be called ALE, since essentially all the options here are governing what happens once you bring an ALE into Avid. That is what all of these options are for, but they're called Shotlog since an ALE is for logging shots, essentially. But little suggestion, Avid, I would rename this to ALE Management or something like that, just to make it a little bit easier to find. As you can see, we have various options here. The default is maintain events as logged, meaning if I drag and drop an ALE in there, it's going to maintain the events from the ALE and just create a whole bunch of new clips from the ALE named after the data in the ALE. We don't want that. We want to combine the metadata in the ALE with the clips that I've brought in, so we'll use one of the other options. But I'm going to skip over the next 3 options here, which all involve merging the data and then doing a subsequent action. I want to keep it a bit more manual. I just want to merge the data right now. So I'm going to tick the one at the very bottom, which is merge events with known master clips. And you'll see it keeps talking about events. Events is just all the cells of data within the ALE. So I'm merging those events with the events data already in the bin. So with that enabled, we'll hit OK, come out of my settings window, and then I'm going to open up my Finder, and I'm going to go to my ALEs folder. We have it right here. And I can actually bring in both of these ALEs at once, since I have both my red and my array footage all transcoded here, not all in together. And to do that, I just simply drag and drop these ALEs on top of the bin with all of the clips selected. And you'll notice that as soon as you drop this ALE on, it'll add the file extension back on to all of the clip names. That's sort of the indication that this has been successful, but obviously a better way to check is just scroll along to the right in the bin, and you'll notice a whole bunch more metadata has been added. Like we have source file path, I've got the white balance from the camera ID, the camera type, serial number of the camera, the firmware, you know, all this lovely data that's been entered in by the camera department at the camera level on set is now directly attached to our clips. Now, important to point out here, this ALE I have made from Resolve that is just reading stuff from the camera. This is different to an ALE that you might receive from a DIT department on a scripted project, only in the sense that those ALEs will likely contain a lot more data that will have been input and added by the DIT, or at least checked to make sure it's there. Stuff like slate, take, direct contextual information from the shots that would have been double checked and added straight in there. This won't have that. However, it will give you essential source information like the lens type used, which can be very, very useful when you're passing over for VFX turnovers, for the VFX artists, to be able to match that when you're doing visual effects shots. And this concludes our process of making Avid proxy files inside of Resolve and getting them into Avid. So if you followed along with this and you've managed to do it, congratulations, well done, you've got it all in. Now, one final thought that I'll say on this, just to kind of round this out and make sure that you've got the most essential point of this, is that while stuff like the data burn-ins and even the ALE is an optional step, the process that we went through at the very beginning of doing the real name into the tape column is not. That is a very essential step that will be needed when relinking back to the source files at the end. Now, this isn't all too different if you were going through and making proxies in Avid Media Composer. The standard practice there would be to link them in and then dupe the file name into a column like cam roll or lab roll or dis label before you do your transcode, so that that common metadata is in the source and the proxies that you would then make out of your linked files in Avid. This is just a resolve way of essentially doing the same thing. And if you'd gotten to this point and you had forgotten to do it, I would actually highly recommend going back to Resolve, remaking the transcodes with that step enabled, since this will just save you so much time and headaches later down the road when it comes time for the conform. But that concludes this workflow video of making Avid proxy files inside of Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve. This is something that's done all around the world by DITs on scripted projects, from short films all the way through to high-end blockbusters, albeit with a lot more detail in stuff like more specific and custom LUTs, as well as a lot more metadata entry. Huge thanks to everyone who's watched the video, with a special thanks to my Patreon subscribers and YouTube members. Always greatly appreciated, guys. Thank you very, very much. And if anyone has any questions on this workflow, or really anything that I've went through since the very beginning of the video, please just leave a comment down below and I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can and see if I can help you out. But as for this video, that is me done for the day. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye now.